Good afternoon, Chair French, and members of the committee. My name is Montana Williams, and I'm the Director of State and Local Public Policy for the Chamber of Progress. We are a tech industry coalition working toward technology's progressive future. Our organization works to ensure that all Americans benefit from technological leaps. Our corporate partners do include Amazon, Google, and Meta, but our partner companies don't have a vote or veto over our positions. We urge your committee to oppose SB 355. This bill has already been rejected by 15 state legislatures, will hurt small online sellers, and is unnecessary now that big box retailers and online marketplaces have endorsed a new compromise version of this bill at the federal level. SB 355 would make small online sellers collateral damage in Walmart's battle against Amazon. Brick and mortar marketplace giants are trying to stifle healthy competition and will ultimately hurt Etsy artisans, eBay sellers, and other online micro businesses. According to a recent article in The Atlantic, bills like SB 355 will ultimately help Walmart by weakening the competitive advantage of large-scale online shopping platforms whose success is a much larger existential threat to their bottom line than thieves could ever be. This bill, it won't stop sophisticated counterfeiters who will surely adapt to the new rules. 15 states have already rejected bills similar to SB 355, prioritizing the needs of online entrepreneurs and consumer choice. Legislators in both Republican and Democratic-led states agreed this legislation would add additional obstacles that would ultimately hurt small sellers, decrease opportunity, increase red tape, and hinder consumers in search of a deal. The only state to pass this legislation is, as you said, Walmart's home state of Arkansas. And finally, a federal compromise version of this bill has already been endorsed by both retailers and leading online marketplaces, making this legislation unnecessary. In October, U.S. House members introduced the Federal Informed Consumers Act to combat the online sale of stolen, counterfeit, and dangerous consumer products. This legislation is supported by retail groups, along with a coalition including Etsy and eBay, and Amazon as well. And just to point out a few things that were said in earlier testimonies, H.R. 5502 has been voted out of the committee and will be going to the floor. And this bill, as it stands, does have a lot of differences than the federal version. For example, the 5,000 number in this bill, at the federal level, the number is actually 20,000. Online marketplaces are largely borderless and don't observe state-by-state boundaries. Since SB 355 greatly differs from the federal version, passing this bill would exacerbate a patchwork of state laws on an issue that is more properly addressed at the federal level. The consensus approach reflected in the federal version of the legislation represents the best model for tackling this issue without harming online sellers. We hope you will heed the perspective of legislators who have assessed the consequences of passing state versions of this legislation and oppose SB 355. This bill will take sides for Walmart against Amazon, will hurt small online business owners, and has been rejected in all but one state legislature. We encourage the New Hampshire legislature to instead support the improved federal compromise version of this bill that has broader support. And I would be open to taking any questions you may have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So would you be in support of the federal version of this?
On the federal level, yes.
So we're looking to incorporate that into this bill. Would you then be more likely to support this at that point?
I definitely think, thank you for your question. I definitely think that it's a step in the right direction, but I do still believe, and the Chamber of Progress still does believe, that it will be creating a sort of patchwork among the states. Each state would have different rules, different regulations that could ultimately end up hurting smaller sellers. For example, if somebody was selling something in New Hampshire, took verbatim what the federal bill is, maybe they're selling in Florida and the rules may be a little different. They may be suspended in Florida and therefore would miss out on supplemental income that they may rely on. So that's why we, the Chamber of Progress, do support it at the federal level instead of state.
Great, thank you. Senator Bradley?
Thank you very much. So what if we were to add a contingency clause that, especially since this bill takes effect January 1st, that it only becomes effective if the federal legislation doesn't move in the next year?
Like I said, I think the ideal situation would be to defer to the federal level.
Go ahead.
Get the floor.
That might be the ideal situation, and having served in Washington before, I would agree with you on that. But also having served in Washington before, I know dysfunction when I see
Yes.
dysfunction. And if, I think it's highly unlikely anything passes this Congress. And so, again, I would ask you the same question. If it doesn't go into effect by the end of this year, what would your position be if this were contingent upon that not happening?
The position, I believe, would still stay the same, still opposing this legislation. I think that there are other ways to handle the situation. I know other states that have rejected similar bills, like California, for example, have created a task force in order to provide the state with more resources to stop crimes at the front, so that we're not trying to then backtrack or go forward and try to correct a problem after it's already been done.
Okay, thank you.
Then again,
Thank you for taking my question. One of the earlier speakers, Mr. Demers, mentioned how somebody in our Senate building here bought bad face masks that were all moldy, and they had no recourse, nowhere to go. So I just don't see how the 5 things that are asked for here, name, address, email, phone, tax, or bank account, I don't see how that is an onerous burden on the seller. Maybe you could tell me how it is more.
Yeah,
That I
of
don't
course.
see it.
And thank you so much for your question. The Chamber of Progress, we do believe that there needs to be some sort of verification process, absolutely. Transparency is key. But the onerous part about it is the amount of time, the turnaround time for verifying that information. For example, as soon as somebody hits $5,000, for example, they have 24 hours to respond, to give all that information. A lot of times, especially small businesses that may not have the manpower to consistently keep up with everything, may miss the 24-hour mark, and from there will be suspended. Their business will, they'll be out of business. I also think that the tracking system that they have to report to, for example, that's also an issue that would be onerous as well, because currently there is no tracking system used for verification. And in the legislation, it's kind of vague. It doesn't say that the legislation will actually create this tracking system or not. So that kind of leaves the sellers with their hands in the air. Like, how do I verify? What third party will I go to? There is no third party, and that will also cause them to miss the 24-hour mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
any other questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you so much for your time.